everybody. I'm Tom Bassel.
I'm Z Garcia. Hello.
And I'm Travis Oates from Above Board.
What's Above Board?
Above Board is
a weird statement.
Above Board is a television show which isn't out yet, but it's coming out anytime, I'm told. People tell me.
Yeah, so anyway, Travis is here.
What?
Did you want me to go more in depth?
That pause is very like, yeah, anyway, we're doing this other thing.
No. I'm sorry.
What's going on?
It's one of those days.
I don't think you can hear him over that shirt.
Exactly.
I think that's the problem. Turn down the shirt a little bit.
I can do that.
You know the shirt is loud when the tie fades into the background.
Man, this, folks, is how you judge people on the outside.
I wanted to do that. I talk about your beard. Talk about your tailor.
All right, great. Anyhow, welcome to the show. And we're really glad Travis is here. And yes, I was half listening. He does some show about board games.
Travis is the man, all right? He does a great show, Above Board, about board gaming, the hobby, but it's an inclusive show. It's a positive show.
Yes.
It's that kind of spin on everything that we like.
Yeah, it's really cool, and we're looking forward to it, seeing the full thing of it, which, of course, as everything else in the world, been slightly delayed. So there we go. But meanwhile, he's here on our channel, and today we're talking about our top 10 influential games of all time. Now, we did a caveat at the very beginning when I was talking to Travis about making a list, and we're picking games that are post-1900. That way we don't have to go through the whole chess, checkers, go,
poker,
and all that. Poker. I also feel like we're going to have some crossover. Otherwise, their lists are wrong.
I feel like I'm going to get a lot of hate on this, but that's because I started to go down a lot of rabbit holes. I did a lot of rabbit holing in this one. I kept thinking about what that word meant, influential. I came to a few conclusions, right? Like influential, this is just some things I wrote down. Like influential is not innovative, so don't associate those two things. It doesn't have to be something new. It just has to be something that influenced other things to copy it, is how I kind of thought of it.
Fine, but innovative can be influential.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be.
The way I came up with my list is I thought about what is the DNA of board gaming, and I tried to scientifically figure out where those DNA lines originated. Mm-hmm. So it was trying to figure out where most of what we do in gaming came from, and then as a complete aside, all of my games had to still be on the market for sale somewhere.
Oh, wow.
Because if they're influential games and they're powerful games, I feel like they should still be out there in the market.
No way.
I did something similar. I did something similar to that, but I did not necessarily go with the origin of that mutation of DNA.
Sure.
Because that one might have been earlier, but it didn't catch on. Right? I think some ideas are older than the one we attribute them to, the game that we attribute them to, and they just sort of didn't catch fire.
Well, that's why I say that not only was it the original DNA of the concept, but they're still for sale. Obviously, they were influential enough that even if they were made 70 years ago, we're still playing them today.
Dude, crossbows and catapults is still for sale. I'm just saying.
No,
you can still get it.
No, it's not. Where?
Go to Etsy and type in.
So tell us how you came up with your completely wrong list, Tom.
I picked games that have influenced modern gaming today in various ways, whether it was design, whether it's the fact that it's helped games sell, or whether it's growth of the hobby itself. On that end, there are other factors that are not games that have influenced the hobby. And to that end, I'm not doing a top 10 grammar list. The other things that have influenced the hobby, I made a list of those, and we'll be doing that later today at 3:30 if we ever get through this list, which we should start now. I thought this would be a fairly congenial, cooperative list. I can see I was wrong. Start it up, Roy.
Number 10.
All right, what do you got, Travis?
All right, my first. Now, I also did my list in chronological order, because
last time you're on the show.
Yeah, exactly.
Except after
the reason being is because all of these are so influential that it's hard to parse which one would be most influential. Nope. So I just decided to do them in chronological order.
Okay.
And so my first game was from 1906.
Yep.
And it's probably not the game you're thinking it is. I'm being a little cutesy with this. But it's the Landlord's game.
Monopoly.
Well, it's the Landlord's game. There's a big difference. And here's why I say that. First of all, I don't want to put Monopoly on the list. I don't want to put Monopoly on any list. But I don't know if you know the whole story out there. I'm sure Tom does.
Yes.
And Z does. But the Landlord's game was invented by Elizabeth McGee. All the way back in 1904, she say 1906 because that's when she actually came out with some copies of the game. It was then stolen by Charles Darrow in 1933, I think, and it came out 1935 from Parker Brothers. And it was stolen like there's no question it was stolen. He even copied the game so much that there was a error in the spelling of Marvin Gardens, and he kept that error. So, I mean, he really stole the game just outright. And because of that, I have a hard time. He really is a dastardly man in history. Yes.
Where can you buy the Landlord game today?
Well, and this is why I'm being cutesy. The Landlord game, of course, is Monopoly. They may have changed the
Monopoly.
name. So it is Monopoly, but I still say Landlord game.
Nice pull there, Tom. I like it.
Yes.
Kudos
So you're still trying to pull me into
Monopoly.
Monopoly.
You guys started this. That's all I'm saying.
Still trying to pull me into Monopoly.
Good, Tom. That was good.
But obviously, you can't. Modern board gaming, by any. There wouldn't be as big of a board gaming industry if it wasn't for Monopoly or the Landlord's game. It was the first game that had any complexity to it, outside of simple moves. At that point, the complexity was all within abstracts and the strategy on how you moved things. In fact, it was turned down. Elizabeth McGee had a hard time selling the game. She self-published it originally because everybody thought it was too complex for modern gamers. Modern gamers being folks in 1906. And Parker Brothers and Milton Bradley turned it down until, of course, a dude said that he made it, and then they said, "Oh, that's great." But by that time, it had already spread to campuses, mostly college campuses, all over the United States.
All righty, Z, top that one.
Let's go back to the first month in 1901. It's January. It's cold out. We're in Massachusetts. As you open your windows, you look out across the land. What do you see? El Grande.
I don't think it's that old.
Is this in Spain?
Yeah.
No, it said Massachusetts for some reason. I didn't even remember what it was. El Grande is my number 10, and I'm going with that one because I think that one was one of the first games that introduced the idea of area control. It's a game that helped popularize the dry eurogame concept. It was set in a time period that a lot of games continue to utilize and sort of, pick a place in Europe and set it there about 400 years ago. And again, the idea of controlling areas really does come from this game, counting cubes or whatever it may be. It influenced a lot of people who became big game designers later on, like Alan Moon made a few area control games based on what El Grande introduced. I think for me it's number 10 because I think area control has kind of faded to the background a little bit in a lot of games. I think a lot of games have concepts of area control. I think we describe very few games today as area control games primarily. So it's, again, DNA is sort of woven into gaming at large, but it is largely diluted as well. Hence, number 10 for me, El Grande.
I was going to say, I think you just picked it because it's called The Big.
El Big.
Yeah.
How big? That's a good choice. I did put on my list because it just doesn't break the top 10 for me. I'm not even sure it's in the top 20 at this point, but it definitely is an influential game.
It's not in my top 50, so.
It's in my top 10.
Is it?
All right, my number 10.
Which one?
10.
My number 10 is Alien Frontiers. And this is for the simple fact of it was the game that people noticed about Kickstarter. Launching Kickstarter, there's no denying that Kickstarter is a major force in our hobby at this point, to the point where, with everything going on right now, could easily become the dominant force in our hobby. Or not, who knows. But for the past several years, for the past decade, Kickstarter has been growing and growing. Alien Frontiers is the game that launched it off. So while the game itself is good, I'm talking about the game itself is a marker, and people look at it, and it was made in a different way. And so I worry that I might have this place too low on the list, frankly. But
I think so.
Well, the only reason it's ranked lower on the list for me is because there's been a series of games that have made it popular. When me and Rado did something similar about influential games over the last decade, he mentioned Zombicide, and that's a good point because Zombicide's the one that showed that Kickstarter could blow things up, make them huge.
I just think it's too low on the list because it was made in 2010. So.
Oh, I'm doing mine the way that we were supposed to, which is least influential to most influential. So.
Oh, snap.
You've been waiting to hold that stupid sign up.
I'm going to get a lot of use out of the sign.
I hope you have one that says correct.
I do not.
Of course you do.
All right. My number 10, Alien Frontiers.
Number 9.
Okay, my number 9, we move all the way forward in history to 1938. And by the way, I have to say, I think Tom tricked me into this because there's going to be a lot of mass market games on this list, and I'm going to get shellacked for it. Now, I want to say, I don't think all of these are great games. They're not all games that I love to play, but I do think they're influential.
We already agreed with your first pick.
Oh, I there you go. 1938. There you go.
Sorry.
The game is Yacht. Not Yahtzee, but Yacht. Yahtzee was in 1938. Yahtzee came along in 1956. And again, this time Milton Bradley instead of Parker Brothers just stole the game Yacht completely and added a couple minor changes and said that it was invented by Edwin
Top
S.
10
Lowe.
steps in board game history. What's going on?
I know. Basically,
I just want to you made this big deal about all the games in your list were available for purchase today.
They are.
So far, you are 0 for 2.
No. You can buy Yacht anywhere. It's also called Kismet. You can buy Yacht and Kismet.
Yacht?
Yacht. No, you can buy Yacht. Go online right now. Just a second here. I need another.
I'm doing it. Keep talking about this dumb game.
All right. Just a second here. There we go. There. Make it more specific. There we go.
Oh.
All right.
Somebody's making that printer work overtime.
But yeah, Yacht is basically.
Too.
And this of course is that we are still to this day using the Yacht or Yahtzee method of rolling dice 3 times, picking the dice. Not only that, but it was the first roll and write to really gain popularity in the United States, which is a large genre now. I would say it's one of the fundamental DNAs of gaming is dice and dice placement and roll and writes. That's Yacht, 1938.
Okay, so for my 9, I did a very similar thing to what you just did, but I thought about Yahtzee, and then I looked at all the roll and writes. Because right now, no one's going to argue roll and writes are coming out left and right. No
Absolutely.
pun intended. They're just everywhere. Every publisher, every designer has one that they just seem to like, oh yeah, I have this in my back pocket now because it's now.
Some might say too many. I wouldn't say that, but some might say
I
that.
would definitely say too many. And they're starting to look really similar.
Sure.
So I looked back through the years, and there were a couple consistently until we got to what I found was the one that all the games look like now. And after that point, everybody put one out. And so I went with Quicks for my number 9. It was Quicks, it seems to me, from looking at the timeline, that gave you that, grid of colors and numbers, dice, and everybody writing at the same time. Basically, every roll and write for the last 9 years or so. And so that's the one I went with, because I think it was this one that sort of reminded everybody these are pretty easy to make and they seem to sell well. Mm-hmm. So let's make 1 or 4.
All right. You know what? I have to give some credence to you, Z, here.
Go ahead.
Because Rado said the same thing.
He said the same thing? He said Quicks?
He said Quicks.
So I really should have watched this list.
You're saying Quicks is more influential than Yahtzee?
I think to the game we live in right now,
yeah.
I think Quicks is more influential than Yahtzee, yes.
Okay.
But then again, I wasn't born in the 40s like some people.
Just out of curiosity, how many different versions of Quicks are out there?
People are still buying. Are we counting the basically like rip-offs as different versions?
Sure.
I don't know.
Is there a couple hundred different versions of Yahtzee out there? I'm just saying, if we're talking not games that we like, but games that are influential, I still say that Yahtzee, there would be no Quicks without Yahtzee. But that's just me.
That's true. Absolutely. No, I agree with that. That's going to be true for a lot of the games on my list, though, that there wouldn't be that game without something before. And in that case, I'll point you back to there wouldn't be any of these without cardboard. So we should just put trees on the list.
True, but cardboard wasn't invented after 1900.
Okay, so tactic.
Depends what kind of cardboard we're talking about. Let us dig into corrugated.
My number 10 and number 9 is Tactics 2. Now, many of you may not have heard of this game. It came out.
Well, there wouldn't be a Tactics 2 without a Tactics 1.
That is correct.
Put that out there right now, baby.
Tactics 1 actually is the first. It's considered to be the first war game. Tactics 2, though, the direct descendant, is the one that that was very popular. Avalon Hill.
What year was that?
Designed by Charles. It was 1958. It's designed by Charles S. Roberts, who they actually now have a War Game Award named after Charles S. Roberts. And Tactics is not really considered to be that great of a game. On Board Game Geek, it's ranked 18,434. On War Games, it's ranked 3,081. So it's pretty low there. However, at the same time, you talk to any of the war game historians, and this is the game that started it all. This is the game that kind of said, hey, there's a big push. There's different arms of board gaming and of modern board gaming, which is what we're talking about, which people care about, not about Disney Yahtzee. So in this regard, wargaming is one of those branches, and even though I poke fun at wargamers a lot, I cannot argue how much it has been a big put on our hobby, and Tactics 2 would be one of the grandfather of that. So that's my number 9, Tactics 2.
Sure.
Number 8.
Okay, back on the correct list. We moved to 1949.
I was not expecting this much kind of controversy and hate, to be honest.
Well, this is. I know. See, you've even got the box up there. I'm being influenced by the box. We moved to 1949 and a little game called Scrabble.
It's like trying to get through those AFI's top 100 movies of all time. We're just like, Stella
again,
and Rosebud and all that boring stuff.
Again, created by Alfred Mosher Butts, which was his last name. Created this. He actually created it in 1938, but then sold. He wasn't able to get anywhere with it on his own, and sold it to James Bruneau, who created the game. Pretty much the same game, but put it out in 1949. Now, I would say that Scrabble, not only is it one of the very first, it's definitely the first game to use that creating words, which we still again do today. Hardback and paperback are still doing that kind of thing today, and there are numerous games that do. But it was also the first game that assigned points to specific tiles and awarded you on how you put the pattern of those tiles down on a board.
Wait, are you actually explaining to people how to play Scrabble?
No, I'm saying that this is the first game that did that, that assigned points to a tile, and you got additional points as to how you put those tiles out in a pattern on a board. I'm saying, again, that is the fundamental DNA of many, many games today. Again, we're talking DNA here, people. We're talking influential games, not just games that Z rolled out of bed and, picked out of a hat.
Speaking of hat picking, my number 8 is Risk Legacy. And again, it's the first one that did the whole legacy thing. I think it in many ways sort of woke people up to the ability to do new things with the same old tropes. This was a bit of a wake-up call to people that games, board games especially, can behave and be utilized in fundamentally different ways. The idea of buying a game and having it be an heirloom for 2 generations for now doesn't have to apply to every game. The idea of a game not being a consumable doesn't have to apply to every game. The idea of a game allowing you to personalize that. All the things that come with legacy games. I think this was interesting. Now, I don't think there's that many games that are legacy games. I think they're extremely difficult to design. But I think even when a game designed now does not necessarily become a legacy game, I think those people still take interesting lessons from what the legacy games have done. The ability to change from play to play, even if those things are resettable. There's a lot there that you can sort of go, yeah, that comes from legacy style games. And this was the first one. It's a very easy first one to pinpoint. And it's also one that, because it was based on Risk, the space from regular old Risk to this brand new thing that mass market gamers and hobby gamers are playing, there's a lot of room there that separated those two parameters. So, yeah, that's my number 8, Risk Legacy.
I don't know how Tom feels about this. The reason I didn't have Legacy on my list is just because I don't know that Legacy, it ended up looking, it's kind of like the Segway of games. When the Segway came out, everybody thought this was going to revolutionize and change the way that we move around in the world. And in the end, you don't see Segways anymore, and it didn't really change anything. And that's kind of how I feel about legacy games. At first, it felt like, oh, wow, this is fundamentally going to change board gaming. And as it is now, I can maybe, off the top of my head, name 2 hands worth of legacy games and 1 hand that are good of legacy games. So it feels like legacy didn't really fundamentally change much. It was this moment in time, but I don't know that you're going to see tons of legacy games come out in the future. I don't know. We'll see. But I
agree. I think again they are too difficult to make. But using the same analogy, while we don't see segues, I think we do see spin-offs and the things that have its DNA in them now.
Right. And I think legacy aspects to games, like Gloomhaven, for example, has a legacy aspect to it. It's not a legacy game per se, but I think that is a more fundamental
I think
change.
Though it also had just points in the game where there was a major story event. It pushed story in Eurogames that we hadn't seen before. This was on my short list. This was definitely on my short list. So speaking of short list, my short list also included Yahtzee for the idea of the roll-in rights, but it just didn't make the top 10. Sure. What did make the top 10, though, and started, in my opinion, a whole genre of games, is the Resistance. Now, yes, Werewolf has been around for many more years before the Resistance, but it didn't. I think we can argue it couldn't have been that influential since nobody was copying it. Nothing was really coming out of, no, people were making Werewolf Mafia, and variants of such. Resistance said, hey, I'm going to take the idea of of Werewolf and put it into a board game with some pretty solid rules. And that took off like a hit. And now we've seen hundreds of games that have followed this in the social deduction genre. To the point, they come out consistently, and not just in Resistance and social deduction games, but we see it spread into other games too, even bigger games, a little bit of this going on. And I really think the Resistance was the linchpin there. Yes, Werewolf was first, but the Resistance is the one that brought it into the limelight. Social deduction games.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It follows the logic that I'm following on my list, i.e., the correct logic.
Oh, I do. All right.
It's okay. It's all right.
All right.
Number 7.
And that's why you're wrong, Travis.
Exactly. Back to National Geographic's history and the origin of board gaming. In 1959.
Oh, jeez.
My game number 7 came out.
What Z mentioned earlier about the movies, they do the top 100 movies of the century. I always like, let's fast forward till we get to ones I care about.
Yeah, let's get to the 70s.
And this is the true first game that involved first true war game, and that is Risk, which was actually developed in 1957 by a French film director. Because those film directors, those guys are smart.
Well, he wanted to use it to film long shots of war scenes. So he figured, I can't get this many extras. What I'll do is I'll develop a board game, you see.
Exactly.
And then I'll just film that. It was smoke.
It was first called Conquest of the World, brought to the United States in 1959 by Parker Brothers. It was the first area control game. It was the first war game of its kind. There had been people had been playing.
H.G. Wells may disagree with that. But
well, what I'm just going to say is people had been playing with the like 10 soldier style war games that had a loose collection of. Every game was a little different. They were kind of house ruled heavily. But this was the first one that had put a set of rules together and put it in the hands of regular people and not just old Englishmen with hunting trophies on their wall going, I think we should attack Istanbul. So outside of those guys, these guys finally got war games. And it predates Tom's choice for this by 1 year.
Sure, but my game was affected modern wargaming. I'm not going to.
Risk affects modern wargaming?
I will allow the wargamers in the comments to handle this. You guys go for it. Travis said that Risk is the grandfather of wargaming. No, okay.
I said Risk is the ground DNA. I know I'm going to
You
get
said it was the first real war game, I believe.
I said it was the first war game put in the hands of a regular person.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you're calling a lot of people irregular people? I will posit that El Grande is the grandfather of wargaming.
El Grande is the grandfather of wargaming? Okay, yeah.
My number 7 follows suit with my factually questionable choices.
Yes, yeah.
My number 7 is a tile laying game. The tile laying game that
Scrabble
had a billion copycats.
If it's not Scrabble, then you're wrong, but go on.
It's not Scrabble. What do you think it would be?
Carcassonne.
It is Carcassonne. I also considered Waterworks. Okay, Waterworks is older. Waterworks
That's a good choice.
is the same concept as Carcassonne, technically speaking. But there really weren't that many tile-laying games between Waterworks and Carcassonne. It did not get copied. Again, same concept as Werewolf and the Resistance. After Carcassonne, tile laying free-form side matching, right, where every side will match something, they just exploded. So everybody made one, and then people were like, oh, how about triangles? How about now they look like this? How about we make elongated rhombus rhombi shapes? And people just sort of went nuts with that. But Carcassonne is the one that made it something to pursue because of profit. Because it was profitable to make tile-laying games. So, yeah, Carcassonne is my number 7. And the Catapult, I think, is the most influential expansion of all time.
Alrighty. My next one here is influential, I think,
I was
in
kidding about
different...
Catapult, by the way.
Sure you were.
Yeah. I like the Catapult. My next one's influential in 2 different ways. And that's... Because, I'll just tell you the game first. The game is Shadows over Camelot. So there's no question at this point in time that cooperative games are huge. They're a giant part of the market. And I really waffled on this one by thinking about Pandemic, because Pandemic is obviously a huge hit in this regard.
I'm not familiar with that game.
Shadows over Camelot
came out after 1958.
Shadows over Camelot was the first major cooperative game. Yes, there was Lord of the Rings came out from Knizia, but it did not have a lot of people following it and doing things with it. So Shadows over Camelot did that. It also incorporated the Trader as a minor thing, but most importantly, it brought up the level of everything in components in a board game. If Shadows over Camelot came out today, I would say these are great components, such as I expect from a board game now. When Shadows over Camelot came out, they were way above everything else. Now, this wasn't the first big box game that Days of Wonder had done. That would be Mystery of the Abbey, which also kind of blew everyone's mind. But Mystery of the Abbey did not have the success that Shadows over Camelot did. Now, Shadows over Camelot did not reach the dizzying heights that Ticket to Ride and Memoir did, but it was pretty high up there. Dude, if you're going to do that, you should probably spell all the words right.
What did I misspell?
But anyhow...
I misspelled vassal. I didn't do this.
Anyhow...
That was my
What
assistant.
are raisins?
Oh, is it raisins that I misspelled? I can't read it from the back.
Well, flip it around and look at it.
Oh, yeah.
So
I
pulled
the vassal. I pulled the vassal. I misspelled something.
Oh, yes.
Ooh,
anyhow.
Okay, that's got it.
So Shadows over Camelot, I think, really important for cooperative, really important for game component quality. Also elevated Days of Wonder to a major thing. And I think influenced all companies to try to meet this standard of art, miniatures in games, which were pretty, I mean, they were just little busts that moved around and little catapults and stuff. But it was really, it was a game changer, I believe. So that's Shadows over Camelot.
I like it. It's a good pick.
Number 6.
Okay, you think up to this point, my picks have been controversial. This one's going to take the cake. Because you're going to argue with me that this isn't even a board game. And some out there, I'm sure, are going to agree with you. But this one came out in 1974. And this is Dungeons and Dragons.
That's a good choice.
Now, I would say for those people...
First good choice you've made.
Oh, there you go. Excellent. I figured that I was going to have to argue that this was actually a board game.
No, we didn't say board game. We said top 10 influential games on the board gaming hobby.
From here on out, they're all video games for me, actually.
Okay. Excellent. Perfect. Without Dungeons and Dragons, you wouldn't have things like even the terms, experience points, hit points. Every dungeon crawler that exists now has its DNA attached to Dungeons and Dragons. You might even call this the first one versus many. And if those of you who've had dungeon masters who are trying to kill you know exactly what I mean by that. It's also asymmetrical play, which you didn't see a whole lot of that before D&D, where you had each person had a different character who played very differently from one another. So much to the point where, unlike in modern Dungeons and Dragons, in the first edition, even the experience point chart that you had, you leveled it completely different in completely different ways, and your powers wildly fluctuated from character to character. So that's my number 6 is Dungeons and Dragons.
That's a solid pick. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that pick. My number 6 is very, very similar. A game that came along, influenced a lot of things, introduced a lot of concepts. Cosmic Encounter. It's an easy one to defend. Cosmic Encounter is the game that introduced the idea of you having a unique power for the entirety of the game. It introduced a whole lot of replayability and variability. It also, I like the part of it I find endearing that I think has been lost through time, but a lot of games are okay with it, is the idea of not everything having to be balanced and allowing the players to self-balance a game. I think bidding games have kind of taken up that mantle. You know, you put out 4 things, they're wildly, imbalanced, but if you win the bid, you pick the good one. So no problem. Just bid more. So this idea of everything must be uber balanced, every strategy identical, to the point that why am I picking one? Just pick any. They're all identical. I think balance has crossed that point where now you might as well not give me extra strategies. They're all the same. But I think Cosmic did a good job with that. Just everything kind of feeling different, every game feeling different. So, yeah, Cosmic Encounter, my number 6 pick.
I also think that's a good pick.
Yeah.
What?
It's a kumbaya moment happening here.
Oh my goodness, the first one of no others.
All right.
Tom has yet to
All
have
right.
one, right, but UZ, that's one.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm willing. I mean, if no, never mind. My next one here.
Cosmic's going to be on your list. I don't care what you say. At some point, it's going to be on your list.
Yeah. My next one came out in 1981, and I believe influenced the hobby in 2 different ways. One, it made party games popular, and 2, helped introduce that idea that, hey, anybody can make a board game and become rich, and that would be Trivial Pursuit. Now, I really despise Trivial Pursuit. I'm not a huge fan of the game itself.
What are you distracted by?
I'm sorry. Hang on. Okay, there we go.
Wait, is Travis frozen for me? I think he's frozen for me.
Oh, then it's all well for you. So anyhow.
There we go. That is terrifying. Okay, it just popped up with my face.
So anyhow, back to Trivial Pursuit, which is what we're talking about. These guys basically made Trivial Pursuit, sold it, made a bit of a fortune on it. Lots of people saw that. It was like a good rags to riches type story. And it also made the party game genre just became extremely popular in the 80s and 90s. I mean, everyone was making games, and there's a lot of them. And even the trivia thing, like, hey, bringing home this idea of game shows, which everybody liked, and everyone likes trivia, or at least lots of people like trivia, and putting it in the package to the point where this one became part of our popular culture. Trivial Pursuit, that's a game anyone knows. So while it's not a game I'm a huge fan of, definitely one that I think is influential. Trivial Pursuit.
Completely wrong. I disagree with everything you just said.
What part do you disagree with?
Everything.
You just said everything.
Give me some reasoning.
Let's just move on. No,
you got to argue. No, I want to hear this.
We'll talk about it on my number 5.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Number 5.
My number 5 is Trivial Pursuit.
I suspected much.
From 1981.
Yes, said the date.
Yes, creepy Tom, you're right. Trivial Pursuit. He loves it. Loves it. Trivial Pursuit, created by Canadians, by the way. What's that?
Said I'm getting real creepy Lord of the Rings vibes right now.
I was thinking more serial killer, but all right.
Created by Canadians. That's 2 for them. They 100 million copies were sold of this game. Everything actually Tom said was right. It was the first game I think that brought party games to the adult crowd. I think to a certain extent, a lot of games at the time, adults, the non-gaming adults at least, considered were for children. And I think this was the first game that really said, no, adults, regular, everyday adult people can play games. Huh?
Everyday adult Canadian people.
Canadian people, yeah, can play games, and I think it revolutionized it. Everything, Scruples, all those party games that we've heard of, kind of came after that. Balderdash, like you were saying. I think without Trivial Pursuit, you wouldn't have any of those, and it was massive. I think anybody that was born before that time has one in their house, whether they play it or not. It just exists. It's like an alien invasion, and it never leaves. And they're like giant bricks. And you move with them. Even if you don't play it, you still move. You bring the box and you go, I can't throw out Trivial Pursuit.
Right. It's like an Alanis Morissette album.
Yeah, exactly.
You have one. You somewhere. You know you own one.
They're a little pill. Yeah.
And in my pocket.
What do you got there, Z?
My number 5 was mentioned previously, but it's not a crossover. And this is Pandemic. Again, I agree that there were earlier cooperative games, and I also think they were not getting copied. I don't think anybody was going out of their way to make a poker-infused, possibly a trader copycat.
No, that's baloney. It doesn't have to be exact for people to copy it.
I think you're right. No, I'm being facetious. I agree that was an influential game, especially for all the other stuff though, like the production based stuff. I agree with you 100%. But I don't think a lot of people I don't think the genre had been legitimized yet when it came to the numbers, like repeatable numbers of copies sold, right? Money. That's what I'm talking about, money. When Pandemic came out and sold and sold and sold, then everybody suddenly had a cooperative game. You know, some of the first ones were very close, thematically at least, right? Oh, they're fighting disease, we're going to fight fire. Oh, they're doing this, we're doing this other thing that's very similar. Mechanically, they were different people, but even almost every cooperative game has this idea, which, Shadows did too, the good thing, bad thing, right? You do a bad thing, then you do one of three options of good things. I think those two games, Shadows, but then Pandemic, which sold a lot, put those things into play. And
sure, that's why I said it was a hard choice for me to pick one of them.
Yeah, I picked the other one because I knew what you'd pick, so I figured we should mention
I also
both.
thought, we'll mention Pandemic probably.
Well, all right. I believe legally he is bound by contract to mention Pandemic in every top 10, isn't he?
No, there's not every one. There's a certain amount of them, but I needed this one to have it.
Pandemic.
All right, my number 5.
Pandemic
is a crossover with Travis.
Oh, the eyes move. Oh my.
That is
it Pandemic?
Monopoly.
If it's not Pandemic,
he didn't say Monopoly. I said crossover with you. All right, so Monopoly is definitely. I mean, how can we not mention a game that is talked about and is part of popular culture and is just really, yes, roll and move existed before Monopoly, but the whole idea of get lots of stuff, which was not technically the Landlord game thing. Monopoly, changed parts of it to be, hey, it's a joyful thing. So that's why I'm going to celebrate the stolen copy here. But Monopoly, there are so many games that came out in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, which was get lots of money, get a bunch of stuff, get rich, beat everybody else out, roll around the board, do stuff. And it's become such a huge part of popular culture that almost, that's the number one question. I like games. Like Monopoly? Yes.
Yes, like Monopoly.
My number 5, Monopoly.
Number 4.
And that's why I think this is the creepiest top 10 we've ever done.
Carrot Top,
someone has the prop department out of work, just begging to do anything. Anything.
It's your turn, Carrot Top.
Guys needed some work. All right. My number 4 is from 1993. I don't think it's been mentioned yet, which is surprising. Maybe it's just high up on everybody else's list.
It's higher.
Magic the Gathering. My show, we say at the top of the show that Above Board is a show about board gaming, CCGs, and tabletop role-playing. And tabletop role-playing had its origins in Dungeons & Dragons. CCGs has its origins, of course, in Magic the Gathering. This game was also the first game to be sold everywhere. You could go and get your tires changed and buy a package of Magic the Gathering. You could literally go to the doctor, have them, give you a checkup, and on the way out, you could buy a pack of Magic the Gathering. It was everywhere.
We go to different doctors and tire changing services than I've ever been to, but all right.
Well, I'm just saying it was.
Midas is rocking the Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
Called Magic Midas.
Yeah.
If you buy 2 singles, you get a free tire change.
Seriously, they were in stores that you it's the first time I ever saw a game in 7-Eleven, for example. 7-Eleven was selling Magic the Gathering cards. Mm-hmm. And I think that was
a packs of cards in those dispensing units, like the vending machines.
Yeah, and up at the counter, they were just add-ons. Everybody was buying them. 20 billion Magic cards were sold between 2008 and 2016. 20 billion with a B. That is incredible. I also think that it was the original deck builder as well. Even though the deck building aspect of the game was before you played the game, unlike, Dominion, which
those are two different things, but yeah.
I don't think so. But I just think that I don't. I think that Magic the Gathering was the original deck builder. Dominion just decided to make an entire game about the part that you do before you actually have fun in Magic the Gathering.
Oof.
Yeah.
In your face, Dominion.
All right, whatever.
In your face.
Dominion was my number 11, by the way.
Dominion. In your face.
All right, Z, go ahead.
Magic
my number 4 was also mentioned earlier, but again, not a crossover. What is happening today? My number 4 is Zombicide. And again, okay. I think it's because, yes, Alien Frontiers was successful on Kickstarter. Yes, fine. Other games were doing that, and they copied it because it was successful. But I think Zombicide changed the things that are popular in Kickstarter, the things you take to Kickstarter, a lot of them anyway, and the things you get away with on Kickstarter. This idea of throwing everything at the wall. Sure. This idea of bloat upon bloat, just of production trumping literally everything else. The rules, the playability, the balance, the fun. I mean, all of it. It all goes out the window for toys, right? Like the toy factor of something. And I think it was Zombicide who put that into place. Now, whether you like these games or not, which ones you like, which ones you don't, whatever. But it proved that you could go there with 3D renderings of miniatures, usually grotesque ones. That would be a bonus. And you showed up there with that. You walked away with moolah cash.
I definitely think that Zombicide was the first game as miniature delivery system. That there were many people that were buying it, not because they were interested in the game,
sure,
but they wanted the miniatures. Sure. And I think a lot of CMON, and because CMON grew out of being a miniature company, I think a lot of CMON games to this day, I know people that buy those games, have no interest whatsoever in actually playing the game, but want the miniatures for other purposes.
Sure. Yeah. So there you go. That's my number 4.
This is really fascinating me how many times Z's agreed with Rado on this list here. This is fascinating to me, but yes, good pick. All right, I'm actually very disappointed in Travis, since we all know he's doing his list now in chronological order. The fact that he skipped Cosmic Encounter is mind-blowing to me, because not only is Cosmic Encounter clearly the inspiration for Magic, and we know this because Richard Garfield said so, it is the inspiration for asymmetrical board game design, it's the inspiration for diceless combat. There is so much going on in it. It is clearly inspiration for many different games. Now, yes, I like the game a lot, but just Cosmic Encounter is just it's the granddaddy of so many things, and still in print. So it's a game that people still enjoy, which is a rarity, and looked highly on by many people, as opposed to other games like Monopoly and Trivial Pursuit. So Cosmic Encounter, if it only inspired Magic, that would be probably good enough to get on this list here. Now, explain yourself, Oates.
I think that more of the aspect, I think the reason I gave it to Magic the Gathering is because it created an entire genre.
No, I'm not saying you can't put Magic on your list. I'm saying, why did you?
Well, because I think Cosmic Encounter fits into that same pile, and I wasn't trying to think of I was trying to pick one game from each section, I guess, if you want to put it in a better way.
I think Cosmic inspired Magic, but I wouldn't consider them to be in the same.
No, I wouldn't either. I wouldn't either. And I like Cosmic. I just, maybe in my opinion, don't feel it was. Again, if Cosmic was going to be on there, I think it would be on there more because you're right, it inspired Magic the Gathering, but because Magic the Gathering had, I think, a greater impact on the industry as a whole.
Did you find that little sign that says wrong and just hold it up? But
Cool Z. This is what I'm getting from Cool Z. Is just like.
All right, my number 4.
If I had my shades,
Encounter.
That's it.
Number 3.
Number 3 is actually a crossover with Tom Vassell.
Oh,
I know.
Second.
From 2000, and yes, all you people on chat, I am well into the 90s, now into the 2000s, was Carcassonne.
That's a crossover with me.
That was with Z.
Oh, it was Z. With Z. Oh, now he's disappointed in me. Look at that.
Yeah, baby.
The reason that I would say, though, is not what the reason Z gave.
Oh,
It is on this list for one reason, and one reason only, in my opinion. And that's because it created the meeple. And the meeple is by far. Did you say that? I wasn't listening. I was refining my puppet.
No, I will pay your child to come and burn
meeple, you idiot, meeple. There's a bunch. They created so much stuff for me.
Oh, this is terrifying.
Is this how it feels like when I do my masks? Because I apologize.
Yes, Tom. Yes, there we go.
When you do your masks, I watched you doing your masks and changing your hats and your ties, and I figured I was going to punish you for this.
This is exactly what that feels like, Tom. Yes. 100%.
Now you know.
It's called pulling focus. Travis knows what I'm talking about.
Exactly. There you go.
I'm going to take a break.
But yeah, I do think that the meeple is the probably the most recognizable after dice symbol of the gaming industry. It's used. I know on the back of boxes when it says how many people can play this game, it's often represented by a meeple, and the meeple is used in. I don't know of any component outside of cubes, which are probably in more games being created worldwide. So Carcassonne for the meeple, not for the gameplay.
It's a great game. But all right, what do you got, Z?
Oh, it is me. Where are we? Number 3. It's the second deck builder, Dominion. Not Magic, Dominion. And again, I realize I don't think it was particularly innovative. I said so when the game came out. I thought it was a one-trick pony. But you know what? That one trick it did seemed to be extremely lucrative because every other stable taught a pony of theirs that one trick. And they just kept coming out. I'm not a big deck building fan, but it's silly to say that Dominion didn't have a ton of influence on where things stand, and everything that came after it.
You know what Dominion is?
Say about this, yeah.
Dominion, you ever take a trip to somewhere exciting like Hawaii and you spend a day packing? Dominion is the day packing. You're putting all your cards together, you're building a deck, and then in Dominion, you don't do on the vacation. The fun part is left out. Dominion is all the fun games that you would build some fun deck together, and then you don't actually play the game with it. Dominion has no style, it's got no theme, it's just anybody who would put it in their top 10 list had to be out of their minds.
I think you should
it belongs
on
this top 10 list for being influential.
Oh, I know. There's going to be a lot of Dominion fans killing me for this, but I think again, I acknowledge that Dominion was the first deck builder. It's just also to me the most boring deck builder. I would rather play any deck builder.
Yeah, but we're not making a list based on our likes. You put Monopoly on your list.
Gathering the first deck builder.
But you put Monopoly on your list.
I consider Magic the Gathering the first deck builder.
Okay, so when we were making this list here, I think a lot about where to put it, but 1, 2, and 3, really easy. Not even a question. There's 3, and I don't think these will change at any time soon. Number 3 is pretty simple. It's Catan. There's no denying Catan is not only one of the most influential games that come out in the past 30 years, or is it 40 years now? But it's one of the most influential games to come out ever, to the point where it's changed the hobby. They brought the Eurogame style, came to America specifically through this game. It's the game that when people play it, they're like, their minds change. It's the game that's in newspapers all the time, that you see famous people playing it. And the robber in Catan is slowly becoming a small part of popular culture. Just the idea of Settlers of Catan has done well. It made a whole market in America. It brought the idea of you do something on other people's turns. It's why board games are the way they are now. It was easy for me. I might again argue that it might be too low at number 3, but 1 and 2 are that much more strong. Number 3, Catan.
I largely disagree with that, actually. Yeah.
Really? You don't think
I
Catan
think
is influential?
sold well, and I think it's well known. I don't think it's particularly influential, unless you mean that people are more aware of games now.
No way. Catan came to America and brought the idea that board games were fun. Before Catan, when you went to conventions in America, there was war games, a little bit of Dungeons and Dragons, and that was pretty much it. Catan changed everything. Well, that and another game that came out at the same time. But those 2 games changed the market completely. That is crazy to say that that's not the case.
I think the change, there was clearly change around the mid-'90s, yeah, with games coming over from largely Germany. But I think assigning that to just Catan, it's only because it was slim pickings. You know what I mean?
No, man. Catan still sells well today.
It's fine. Not like it keeps. So does Monopoly. I don't think it's very.
That also is on my list.
I just don't think it was particularly. I wouldn't assign it to Catan. I understand that there was a big change in the industry, and what people perceived as games for grown-ups and parties that you could have at your house around a game. I think Catan happened to be. It got lucky.
I'm staying out of this one.
All right. I said my piece. Catan, my number 3.
Number 2.
All right. This is a Tom crossover.
It's Catan, isn't it?
No, it's not Catan. I don't believe against Catan as strongly as you. Catan was on my short list. It didn't actually make my top 10.
Okay. I don't believe that strongly against it. I just
and I don't either. I like Catan. There's a lot of things I like about Catan, but it didn't make this list. But this is Alien Frontiers.
Wow, really?
Yeah, because and simply because I think the largest sea change, at least financially within the market, has been the invention and Kickstarter has changed the way we market, distribute, and create board games at this point. I would actually say I say Alien Frontiers, but it was actually Factions, which was an expansion to Alien Frontiers that came out in 2011. That it made $76,000 in 2011 on Kickstarter.
Okay.
That whole year on Kickstarter, all of games was 3.2 million. So that was 2% of all of that category was Alien Factions, and I think that really woke the industry up and went, wow, this is a very viable. Zombicide the next year made like 780 something thousand, but the difference between 2011 when Frontier Factions came out and 2012 was 3.2 million to 74 million for the games category on Kickstarter. Wow. And Zombicide, even though it sold 780, because that was the other one I thought might fit in this category, that was still 1% of games of the game market compared to Alien Frontiers. So Alien Frontiers, and it's a good game, but it's on that list simply because I think it helped usher in the era of Kickstarter.
Well, I have to agree, it's on my list, but I really can see a good case being made for Zombicide too, though.
Yeah.
I guess for me, ultimately, my list is maybe I focused on the game a little more than you guys did, as opposed to like its impact historically speaking. I focused on what the game did and who monkeyed that thing. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Sure.
So like, Alien Frontiers, its business model got copied, the concepts got copied. The game didn't necessarily get copied. In fact, it was kind of derivative of other area control games, but now, or like worker placement, but with dice,
Sure, that's why it's my number 10.
Zombicide, people monkeyed what it did, not what it kind of like represented. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Anyway. All right, my number, where are we at here? My number 2. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I would say that the way Zombicide marketed itself on Kickstarter became the Kickstarter model.
Right. Yeah,
definitely.
I mean, for that kind of game, anyway.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right, my number 2 is not the first worker placement game, but again, I think the one that did the trick. That's Agricola. The first one, most people would say it's Caelus, though really, again, worker placement is kind of a loosey-goosey definition. Workers action selection could technically be worker placement if you can only do it so many times in a turn, blah, blah, blah. But Agricola came along and suddenly everybody, again, kind of incorporated the language of worker placement into their own designs. It feels like you take a look around these days and a third of games have a worker placement mechanism in. There's a card game with worker placement. Here is this bidding game with worker placement. And here is this sort of silly party game where you're trying to figure out how long a monkey's tail is with worker placement. And it's like, it's everywhere. Worker placement is truly one of the most, woven into gaming at large that I think any mechanism has really been able to do. I think it is absolutely just everywhere. And I think it's Agricola that did it, not really Caelus. Caelus was still a little too elitist, is maybe the wrong word, but it appealed to a group that didn't necessarily translate to everybody being into worker placement games.
Right.
So my number 2.
I would definitely agree with that. I mean, when I was making up the list, I started out kind of picking things like the first worker placement, the first deck builder, and going that route. And I decided not to try not to get caught up in the mechanism of the games. Like, say, sometimes I did and sometimes I didn't, I guess. But, But I didn't want it to be a list of just here's all the games that have that first mechanism. But I agree with you entirely on what you said.
All right.
My number 2 has already been mentioned. Like I said, these top 3 were easy. Has already been mentioned by Travis, and that is Dungeons and Dragons. There's no question that this has a huge influence on board games, not to mention it spawned its entire genre of role-playing games. Dungeons and Dragons has had its ups and downs in the sense that in the 80s, there was certainly a bunch of people who were opposed to people playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Because it's straight evil.
Thanks to Mr. Jack Chick and others. But not only was that thing, though, but it brought the idea of the storytelling in. It created a genre. Now, you can argue that Tolkien is certainly the author of fantasy, but the way most people see fantasy is from Dungeons and Dragons. Tolkien's high fantasy, he has his thing, but the way people think of elves and dwarves and the same things that we see in so many games, the things I complain about all the time. When I say generic fantasy, I mean Dungeons and Dragons fantasy, because that's straight up what they're copying. When I see these different little creatures or whatever, and you call them by names, you tend to call them after Dungeons and Dragons. And so that bled into board games itself, from the vast amount of dungeon crawls that we have to the idea of rolling dice to hit things and adding stuff. There was a lot of concepts, and it breathed life into into gaming as a whole, and which helped boost board gaming. So Dungeons and Dragons was a slow burn. When it came out, it was popular, but it was kind of an underground thing. And where it became really popular was right around the same time that Catan, or maybe a few years before Catan, but there's that trifecta there. And the third one I'll mention at my number 1. So my number 2, Dungeons and Dragons.
And finally, number 1.
All right, now my number 1. Now keep in mind, because I've been watching the chat. I did this in I told you I get destroyed in this, which is about funny because on my show I'm completely pleasant and neutral all the time, and of course here I knew we're gonna get my butt handed to me. But Keep in mind I did this in chronological order. So this is not necessarily I'm saying this is the number one most influential game of all time. It's just the latest. In fact, it's not by far the most influential game of all time. But it is the game that has come out the most recently that I think has had the most effect on the market. And that is, of course, Vicious Fishes. No, not Vicious Fishes. But
Vicious Fishes doesn't make the top 50,000.
It's number one in my heart. It's number one in my heart. No,
it's number one in my heart.
I know.
Oof.
It's Gloomhaven. It's Gloomhaven, and Gloomhaven. I love Gloomhaven, but let me tell you why I think it's been so influential, and I don't know that this is a good thing.
I don't think this is a good pick, but you.
I think. Well, there you go. I think that for better or for worse, Gloomhaven has started a trend where every game that comes out has to feel like it does everything for everybody. It can't just be a solo game. It has to be a solo game, a game that you can play with 2 to 5 people. It has to be a game that has a campaign with it. It has to be a game that is the kitchen sink game. And Gloomhaven is currently my favorite game of all time. And it does that very well. But a lot of games try, I think, to accomplish that. And there's a lot of bloat. I think that if Isaac had tried to sell Gloomhaven to a publisher, they would have said, this is too much stuff, cut a bunch of it, narrow your focus down, because that was the prevalent view on how you design a game at that time. And I think because Gloomhaven has been such a huge success, and because it does work the way that he designed it, to have all those various elements in it, I think everybody is now trying to make that happen in their games. And I think, like I said, for better or for worse, that's a trend that's pretty big right now. And I think I think that it has created a bloat.
Ran out of words. Travis, I've come around.
Yeah.
You've convinced me.
There you go.
I don't know if Gloomhaven's the game I would have picked, but I would like to join your group of pitchfork-holding maniacs.
Yes. I know.
No,
Where do I get my pitchfork?
I can hear that they're literally burning down my credenza.
No. Listen, I actually agree. This was on my short list too. I didn't pick it because it's still fairly newish, and it's hard to put it on all time. But it's up there. I also think it pushes that whole rags to riches. You too could make millions of dollars on Kickstarter. You too can make a game that the publishers would never accept. I had at least 3 publishers ask me, how is this game even sold? They could not understand why people were buying a game that just doesn't work on so many levels, and yet it's number 1 at Board Game Geek.
Somebody on chat said, so it's decided we kill Travis. Yeah.
Whoa, folks.
I knew this was going to be the effect of this top 10.
Not okay, everybody. Not okay.
Come on now. All right, Z, what do you got for number 1?
Nice. My number 1 is crossover with both of you, or it will be momentarily. Magic the Gathering is my number 1. If this was being ranked merely by how much money it inspired and or made, it's Magic the Gathering. Copycats galore.
I will jump in here and join your conversation.
Yeah. I mean,
it is also mine.
I got nothing else to say. It's Magic the Gathering. You go ahead, Tom. Take it while I sharpen this large blade.
No, I mean, Magic the Gathering, multiple things. 1, it created a whole genre of collectible card games, which then has morphed into living card games and other things. It also single-handedly kept the entire gaming business afloat financially in the 90s. And is doing a lot of that today. I mean, one of the reasons that stores are struggling right now is because they can't run organized play in their stores. Even if you could sell games online and everything, that organized play is a big deal. Not to mention all the stuff in Magic the Gathering, keywords on cards and tapping. How many games use tapping? More than one?
Very few, but a lot of them call it something else and use it.
That's true. Exhausting and kneeling. I keep meaning to make a list of alternate words to tapping.
Well, they copywrote so much of that stuff so that you couldn't say tapping. It just recently, I think, expired. So now you can say tapping again. But it was kind of ridiculous that they did that.
Do you say tap in all your games? I do.
Oh, I do. Yeah.
I try not to, but sometimes I still do. Yeah.
So anyway, Magic, I think it was a clear thing. And to me, it's that 93 to 95 period, such a fascinating time because Magic and Catan, the internet came out around that same time. Just, wow, what a change in the industry. You want to look at a point in time, it's right there.
And I know a lot of people out there, because I'm reading the chat because I'm a sucker for punishment. But we're saying how completely wrong and ridiculous I am that saying that deck building is an aspect of the game Magic the Gathering. They're saying that you build the deck beforehand and therefore it's not part of the game. A lot of you guys don't know my history very well, but I was a professional Magic the Gathering player for a while. And I would say if you gather 100 Magic the Gathering players together in the room and you ask them what's the most important aspect of the game, they would say the deck building. Building your deck, the deck that you build is a huge part of the game. It's not a cooperative part of the game, but there are many board games out there and card games and so forth where you spend the first part of the game constructing what you are going to then use or selecting from a bunch of different aspects and building what will be your character or your
I don't think anyone is disagreeing with you here.
I think gathering those 100 people sounds like a magical Magic the Gathering gathering.
See, you stole my joke. I was
sorry, but
when he said I want to gather, I was like, ooh,
there's a stupid joke in here somewhere. Ooh, I'm getting excited.
A gathering of gatherings.
Ooh, give me a break and give me a pause, will you? Give me a pause in the chat, will you? Let me get it in here. Yeah.
All right. Well, folks, we're about to go to another video here. That starts in 20 minutes, so we're going to end this one here. And in that one, I'm going to go through 15 things I think were huge influences on the modern board gaming hobby, and you can agree or disagree. And these guys are here to shoot my ideas down. They don't even know what we're talking about yet, but we're going to sign off here so that we can go do that one. So, right. Travis, thanks for coming on and giving us history lessons.
I thought that was cool, man. You clearly did a ton of research with that, which I really liked, dude.
Special
effects. Thank my prop department.
Yeah, thank you, for any kind of work whatsoever. You bunch of creepers.
Yeah, that's not even the creepiest stuff. There's
okay, show me one more creepy thing.
Want to see the creepiest thing I have?
Yeah, please.
Hello. Hi, I'm Tom Vassal.
Why are my eyes?
I want your soul.
You have it. You have my soul, please.
Thank you.
Take my soul.
All right, folks. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'm Tom Vassal, one of them.
Dead. I'm Z Garcia.
And I'm Travis Oates from Above Board.
We'll see you in 20 minutes.